Hello and welcome to the class. My name's Jo. In today's class, we're going to be looking at academic writing task 1, specifically the components and the overview paragraphs involved in academic writing task 1. If you have a question after the class, remember that you can click on this chat icon at the top of the web page, and that will allow you to send us a message. So this is the second of 2 classes on this topic, and it will last about 20 minutes. First, we're going to look at what an overview is in academic writing task 1, and then we're going to look at examples of this with a graph, a process, and also a map. So by the end of the class, you should be more confident about identifying key features from a task 1 graphic and how to put them into an overview. During the class, there will be some questions for you to answer. I will tell you when you need to do so, and I will give you 10 or 15 seconds to choose your answer. Okay, let's get started. So what is an overview in academic writing task 1? An overview is a paragraph of a report that gives a summary of all the key information or the key features contained in the graphic that you were given. Now, this can go before or after the body paragraphs. As we saw in class 1, probably the most logical place is before the body paragraphs and just after the introduction. But if you prefer, you can put it at the end of your report also. The important thing is that it is there. So what should it contain? Usually we begin the overview paragraph with a word such as overall or on the whole, and this shows that what we're doing is providing that summary, that overview that is asked for. It needs to be a summary of the main features. So before you can write the overview, you have to have looked really carefully at the graphic that you're given and identified what those key features are so that you can write about them in your overview, and then the overview informs what you're going to write about in your body paragraph. We're going to be looking at identifying some key features in some different graphics a little later in this class. Usually we're looking for 3 or 4 main features. There's lots of information in the graph. We can't write about everything, so we have to identify the most important information and write about that. So usually 3 or 4 main features. And it's very important to remember that at this stage, we're not including data from the graphic. So we're not including numbers or percentages or years. That information will be contained later in our body paragraphs. What we're doing at this stage is just identifying what those key features are. So how do we select these main features? Firstly, it's important to remember that we can't talk about everything. There's lots of different information, lots of different data in this graph. So we need to make sure that we focus on the main features, the key features, and that we summarize those in our report. That's what the instructions ask us to do. So in order to do this, we might look at if we can group any trends or any patterns within the data, group different things together. We're looking always for the biggest changes, the things that stand out the most. These will always be the key features that we can see in a graph. Remember also that it's very important in the IELTS Academic Writing Task 1 to make comparisons. So as well as noticing what those key features are, we need to think about how we're going to compare one piece of data or piece of information or trend to another one when we write our body paragraphs a little bit later on. Okay, so what are the main features here? We're going to have a look at this line graph in a little bit more detail. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in so that you can see this a little bit better. Okay, so you can see that there are 6 different lines on this graph. We have walking, cycling, driving, and then we have bus, train, and underground, which could all be public transport. We notice that the years start in 2012 and go all the way to the year 2019. We have here the number of people in thousands. That's important to remember. So we're talking about the number of thousands of people. And we're talking about the methods of travelling to work in the UK. So we can already see, probably looking at the line graph, that there are different things that we could group together. If we look at these three lines for bus, train and underground, which are all public transport, we can see that they follow a very similar pattern. We could probably talk about those together. Similarly, for walking and for cycling, we notice that they follow a very similar trend and a very similar pattern. So we could mention those together also. The one that's very different, that stands out as being very different, is driving, this grey line here. And we may want to mention as well at some point, probably in the body paragraph, that in 2017 we can see that these three lines intersect and become almost the same for a while. So we're going to look at some questions. Okay, on your screen below this video, you will see the question, what happens to car usage? Now, for now, we're not thinking about great language to be able to write our overview. We're just thinking about focusing on the main features and what happens in each of these cases. So what happens to car usage? Have a look at the question below this video. You have 5 options to choose from. Does car usage go up a lot, go down a little, go down a lot, go up a little, or remain stable throughout? Take a look at that question. I'm going to give you 10 to 15 seconds to choose an answer. Okay, so hopefully you chose that it goes down a lot. We can see very clearly from the line graph that it starts here in 2012 at 900 and it goes down, 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 down all the way to 2019 and it ends up at around 250. So it's a big change. Look at the second question below the video and choose from the 5 possible options. So walking and cycling, do they go up a lot, go down a lot, go down a little, remain stable throughout, or go up a little? Choose your answer now. Let's zoom in and take a look. Okay, so walking and cycling as this darker blue and orange line, and we can see that they do increase, they go up, but they don't go up a lot. So I'd say here that they go up a little. That could be our second key feature. Third question for you is, what happens to public transport? Again, look at the next question below this video and choose from it remains stable throughout, it goes up a lot, goes down a lot, goes up a little, or goes down a little. So if we zoom in onto the graph again, we can see that the bus, the train and the underground all remained stable throughout. They started in the same place between 50 and 250, and really they continued exactly the same trend all the way through this period from 2012 to 2019. So it's something else that we can comment on as a main feature that really stands out when we write our overview. Here is an example now of an overview that we could write. Now, we saw in the questions that we looked at very simple language just to think initially about those main features and what we could observe. What we've done now as we write our overview is we've changed that language to make it a little bit more complex and sound more impressive for the examiner. So as we need to do in an overview, we can start with the word overall. So this shows that the paragraph to come is going to be giving a summary, an overall idea of what the key features are. We talked about driving going down a lot. Now we can see here that we say it fell dramatically. So this is better language to use than saying it went down a lot. Similarly, for walking and cycling, we said they went up a little bit. We can change this language here and say that they both showed a steady upward trend. That's very important. Public transport, we've kept the wording that we used before. It's good wording to use, remained stable throughout. And also notice that here we use a phrase to show contrast. On the other hand, now remember that one of the important parts of IELTS Academic Writing Task 1 is comparison. So by using phrases like this, we're comparing one piece of information against the other, and that's going to help us to get higher marks. Let's look now at a process diagram. This is another type of graphic that you could get in the IELTS Academic Writing Task 1. It's probably not as common as some of the other types, but it's still very important to know what to do if you do get one. So we're going to look at how we can identify main features in these types of diagrams. We need to look for a start and an end point to the process. We need to look and see if we have one or in fact two diagrams. It is common to have two diagrams, maybe showing a similar process, but with some differences between them that we can focus on to compare. Is it a man-made or natural process? So does it happen in a factory, for example, with workers, or does it happen outside in nature? We need to look at the number of stages and the main differences between those stages. In the cases of two diagrams, we can actually compare between both of the diagrams and the stages to see what the differences are too. We need to look if the diagram is cyclical or if it's linear. So if it's cyclical, it goes in a circle and then it starts again, it continues, it doesn't stop at all. Or is it a linear process? In the case of linear processes, it has a very clear start point, a very clear end point, and often an end result, some type of product that is a result of that process. So based on these bullet points, what can we say about this process? Let's have a look. So here we actually see that there are two diagrams. We've got forested area and we've got urban area. Now both of these diagrams focus on precipitation or rainfall. We could say that this is the starting point of each of these diagrams. We clearly have a natural process, not a man-made process. And if we think about the direction of the process and think about the order of the stages, we could begin with precipitation, as we said. We can follow the arrows as well. This goes down into the land. We have infiltration. It talks about base flow and erosion. It talks about runoff, and then it talks about transpiration and evaporation, and then the process begins again. So we've got 4 or 5 key stages here that we could discuss. If we compare this urban diagram to the forested diagram, we see exactly the same. We start with precipitation, which comes down into the ground. We talk about infiltration, base flow, runoff, transpiration, evaporation, and then the process begins again. If we look at the urban diagram once more, we also see these words: reduced evaporation, reduced transpiration, increased polluted runoff, reduced infiltration, reduced base flow. So these are showing us the differences between the forested diagram and the urban diagram, and these are the main points, the main features that we can focus on. Okay, so let's have a look now at how we might write the overview. On screen here, we can see an introduction sentence. The two diagrams illustrate the difference in the effects of rainfalls on areas of forest and on cities. Now remember that before we write the overview, we need to write an introduction, which is a paraphrase of the question, and this student has already done this. So we've got this information at the beginning of our paragraph, and now we're going to write the overview of those features that we've just mentioned. Let's read. Overall, it can be seen that less water returns to the atmosphere and the water table in urban areas compared to those in natural spaces, while more water ends up as polluted runoff or causes the land to erode before the process restarts. So here we've talked about the differences between these two diagrams, and that will allow us now to develop those ideas as we talk in the body paragraphs about the more of the details and each of those key stages. Now let's look at a map. This is another type of graphic that you could get in the IELTS academic writing test. So how do we identify the main features for a map? We look at the biggest changes. We look at if there is more or less of something. We look at if the area has become more or less agricultural, residential, industrial, or commercial. And we're going to have a look at this particular map to see if we can identify these features. Now, in this case, what we have is a map from the past in 1815 and a map now. So we have the past to the present. In some cases with maps, you're going to be looking at two maps from the past. You might be looking at a map from the present and predicting something, maybe a plan for developing an area in the future, for example. But in this case, we're looking at the differences from past to present. So let's look at the biggest changes that we can see here. Okay, so in 1815, we had a wooded area, we had a large area of fields, and probably the main thing that stands out now actually is that the fields have disappeared, if we look at the present day map, and these have been replaced with a railway station and a train line that runs all the way up to the top of the map. There's now a cinema. Also, the woods from 1815 are now replaced with a housing estate. And Wesley in 1815 had this large area of houses here, a town hall and a market square. We still have today the market square and the town hall, but we can see that what was previously just houses is now a business and residential area. We also have a shopping, business and residential area at the bottom here in the bottom right that actually wasn't there before. So we've got much less natural space now than before. We've also got the train line, and we've also got more business and commercial and shopping areas than we did have in 1815. So when we look at the map, those are probably the main things that stand out without looking in too much detail. Okay, I'm going to show you on screen now an overview. Now this overview has been split up and has been put into the wrong order. We can see 4 different sentences, A, B, C, and D. Now what I'd like you to do is to read through these and choose the correct order to make an overview for this map. If you look at the next question below this video on your screen, you will also see these 4 sentences. I'd like you to do that now, please, and choose the correct order to make an overview. I'm going to give you 10 to 15 seconds to do that. Okay. Okay, let's have a look at the answer. So here we can see the reconstructed paragraph. Let's read. Overall, the whole town and surrounding area has dramatically changed, with all of the fields making way for a new train line, train station and cinema. The area previously had much more natural space, which has now become residential and commercial. Now, we begin the overview with the word overall to show that we're making a summary, and we talk now in short, because we're going to develop these ideas later on in the body paragraph, about the fact that the fields have made way for the train line, the train station, and the cinema. We're talking about much more natural space before than now, because now we have more residential and commercial space. So in the overview, we've identified, just from really a quick look, what are the salient features, what are the features that really stand out. They show the biggest differences, the main features, and in the overview, the details we write here, this is very important, then feed through into the body paragraphs. Into the body paragraphs, we're now going to write about the specific details that we see in order to complete our report. So that is the end of the class. Now, remember that at the top of the screen, if you click on this chat icon, you can send us a message if you have any questions at all. This is the second class of 2 classes. So now it's really important that you do the practice and training activities related to this topic. Thank you very much for listening and for coming to the class, and we'll see you again. Goodbye.